Watch us on YouTube and Facebook. Listen to our podcast and support us on Patreon. Thanks for stopping by. States need to have the ability to control their affairs concerning territory, population, authority, and recognition. As a country, the people should be able to decide security along our borders, and formal recognition of our sovereignty by other states and countries should be established, and that sovereignty should be domestic, not churches, political organizations, or any other external agent. We the people of the United States need legitimacy and recognition as the sole sovereignty union. The government should acquire the consent of its governed, respecting the separation of church and state, religious tolerance of all people, and freedom of speech. The inalienable and indivisible sovereignty of the whole decides what is good. Enforcement of the law should not be a restriction of the individual's freedom, but a limitation to how that freedom is expressed. We must not allow the factions of this nation, which are divided, the ability to rear up the fabric of the former kind to protect and covet the actions they pursue. Free will cannot be transmitted, and is general, inalienable and indivisible, infallible, and always right. Determined and limits power by the common interest. The general will is always right and good, but its judgment isn't always enlightening, requiring legislation and law. The people though are the ones to decide what laws to make and impose upon themselves. The growth of the state requires the growth of sovereignty as well. In giving more power, authority, and force to the government to contain the people, the same force must be given to the sovereignty to contain the government. Remembering that sovereignty is of the collective being, and one man's order is not law. Sovereignty is the people's unbiased means to ascertain the general will, and there is no law without sovereignty. Through free election and trade, freedom of speech, religion, and private property, true liberalism, equality, and liberty is formed. Replacing monarchy and traditional conservatism with contractual theory, consisting of democracy, sovereignty, and ruled by law. Confusions of the welfare state and liberalism must end. Liberalism is limited government and individual rights, and it is not a part of the New Deal program that is being implemented in the United States today. No government has the right to violate an individual's life, liberty, or property, because these are the natural rights of every individual. Rights that are given through social compact and implemented in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence. Sovereignty is achieved through the contract, covenant, and oaths, free of subjection by any government, based on the idea that people can exist as a distinct legal entity, consenting explicitly or tacitly to surrender certain freedoms, thereby submitting to the sovereignty and law of the land for which they live. In exchange, the rights they still possess are protected, bound only by their own conscience and personal power. Giving up natural personal freedoms in exchange for political order. This was brought to you by the strange, the bizarre, the unusual, I Like It. On YouTube and Facebook. Listen to our podcast on any of these platforms. Anchor, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify. Support us on Patreon. And check us out on Discord. All the links can be found in the description below. We thank you for your participation. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. We love feedback. Watch us on YouTube and Facebook. Listen to our podcast and support us on Patreon. Thanks for stopping by.
Clinical holistic medicine has its roots in the medicine and tradition of Hippocrates. Modern epidemiological research in quality of life, the emerging science of complementary and alternative medicine, the tradition of psychodynamic therapy, and the tradition of bodywork are merging into a new scientific way of treating patients. Millennia ago, around 300 BCE, at the island of Kos in Old Greece, the students of the famous physician Hippocrates worked to help their patients to step into character, get direction in life, and use their human talents for the benefit of their surrounding world. For all that we know, this approach was extremely efficient medicine that helped the patients to recover health, quality of life, and ability, and Hippocrates gained great fame. For more than 2,000 years this was what medicine was about in most of Europe. On other continents similar medical systems were developed. The medicine wheel of the Native Americans, the African Sangoma culture, the Samic shamans of Northern Europe, the healers of the Australian Aboriginals, the Ayurvedic doctors of India, the acupuncturists of China, and the herbal doctors of Tibet all seems to be fundamentally character medicine. All the theories and the medical understanding from these pre-modern cultures are now being integrated in what is called integrative or transcultural medicine. Many of the old medical systems are reappearing in modern time as alternative, complementary, and psychosocial medicine. What is happening today? Interestingly, two huge movements of the last century have put this old knowledge into use: psychoanalysis and psychodynamic therapy, most importantly SCTP, going though the mind on one hand, and bodywork, and most importantly, and sexual therapy, especially the tantric tradition. Almost 20 years ago, we were conducting epidemiological research on quality of life, closely examining the connection between global quality of life and health in a series of huge surveys using large and extensive questionnaires, some of them with over 3,000 questions. We found quite surprisingly, from this huge database, that quality of life, mental and physical health, and ability of social, sexual, and working ability seem to be caused primarily by the consciousness and philosophy of life of the person in question, and only to a small extent by objective factors, like being adopted, coming from a family with only one breadwinner, mother being mentally ill, or oneself being financially poor or poorly educated, which are obviously very much socially inherited. This scientific finding was not expected, and so counterintuitive for us that we were forced to investigate the subject, going to the roots of Western medicine, or the Hippocratic character of medicine. This meant that we had to look at transcultural and integrative medicine, the emerging science of alternative medicine, and to the very much forgotten traditions of psychosomatic, psychodynamic, and bodily-oriented therapies. Theoretically, epidemiologically, statistically, we have been looking at what seems to be the common denominator for all existential healing work in all cultures at all times. We have also been debating many difficult issues related to modern-day medical science. What we have learned from this long journey through the grand medical heritage from the different cultures on this planet is that we need to work on body, mind and spirit at the same time. Medicine then has always combined talking, touching, and praying, and that being human and truly kind is what really heals the other person. This is what Hippocrates called the art one, not the art of medicine, or the art of right living, but simply the art, the way of the human heart, cultivating existence into sheer compassionate behavior and joyful being, which has always been the ultimate goal of all the great healers in our history. The most paradoxical aspect of this is that while we like to think we are taking medicine forward, we are actually just taking medicine back to its roots. The most important thing is that research and development in this field is made in a dialectic process between qualitative and quantitative research. There are basically two ways of documenting an effect of a holistic medical intervention: the quantitative and the qualitative approach. Much effort has been given to developing valid methodology and measuring tools, but the art of documentation has become a complex and expensive task. In this communication we will focus on the qualitative research method. Fortunately, the holistic approach makes it much simpler, because there are always three domains to investigate: health, quality of life, and ability. These three domains can be subdivided in as many detailed domains as one wishes, but often three are sufficient for most purposes. There are two qualitative aspects of documenting effect in medicine, often called subjective, that is from the perspective and experience of the patient, and objective, that is from the perspective of the therapist or researcher. To document effect of an intervention using both perspectives, the patient must be interviewed before and after the intervention. Semi-structured interviews with interview rating of the state immediately before and after the intervention can be used to give the objective perspective on the effect of the intervention. Interviewing the patient after the intervention can give the patient's subjective experience of the effect. Most importantly, these perspectives often leads to two different results, but confronting the patient with the observed improvement, after the patient has given his own experience of the effect, can be very enlightening. The consensus paradigm states that only to the degree that there is consensus between patient and therapist observer, the treatment has an effect. If the patient experiences an effect that cannot be observed, something else is likely to have happened. A pleasant experience with the therapy is not the same as the effect of a treatment. If the patient does not experience an observed effect, this effect is most likely to be happening only in the observer's mind. Very often a therapist is convinced that a cure or intervention gave a positive result, but the fact that the patient did not experience that is then often neglected. So if the patient did not experience any improvement, such an improvement is most likely not to have happened. Interestingly, one single patient is enough to document effect with the consensus paradigm. If both the physician and his patient, after careful investigation before and after the treatment, find that the treatment has helped, this is most likely the case. The more precise the target group and the treatment are defined, the more valuable the documentation. We recommend for securing the validity that the presented method is used with 5 highly comparable patients receiving 5 highly comparable treatments. As always, we recommend for the observer rating a 5-point symmetrical Likert scale with neutral middle point and equidistance 143. A clinically significant improvement must be half a step on this scale or more. The patient needs to express the gain as a significant improvement. There are lots of possible advantages with the scientific holistic medicine that must be closely examined in future research. How can it be maker affordable, efficient medicine for the future? The possibility to prevent disease, the possibility to cure cancer and coronary heart disease, the possibility to seroconvert HIV-positive patients to HIV-negative, the possibility to relieve pain and discomfort, the possibility of rehabilitating working ability, the possibility of improving people's competency as parents, the possibility of improving working efficiency through development of talent, the possibility of helping people to be happy in spite of difficult circumstances and challenges.
Holistic education encompasses a wide range of philosophical orientations and pedagogical practices. Its focus is on wholeness, and it attempts to avoid excluding any significant aspects of the human experience. It is an eclectic and inclusive movement whose main characteristic is the idea that educational experiences foster a less materialistic and a more spiritual worldview along with more dynamic and holistic views of reality. It also proposes that educational experience promote a more balanced development of and cultivate the relationship among the different aspects of the individual, intellectual, physical, spiritual, emotional, social and aesthetic, as well as the relationships between the individual and other people, the individual and natural environment, the inner self of students, and external world, emotion and reason, different discipline of knowledge, and different form of knowing. Holistic education is concerned with life experience, not with narrowly defined basic skills. And holistic education is a fairly new movement, which began to take form as a recognizable field of study and practice in North America. It emerged as a response to the dominant worldview of mainstream education, often referred to the mechanistic worldview. Rather than attempting to provide a model of education, holistic education seeks to challenge the fragmented, reductionistic assumptions of mainstream culture and education. In other words, holistic education is concerned with underlying worldviews or paradigms in an attempt to transform the foundations of education. Holistic education is not to be defined as a particular method or technique. It must be seen as a paradigm, a set of basic assumptions and principles that can be applied in diverse ways. Holistic education addresses the broadest development of the whole person. It aims for the fullest possible human development, enabling a person to become the very best or finest that they can be and develop fully those capacities that together make up a human being. A main element of holistic education is its focus on the interconnectedness of experience and reality. Holistic education attempts to develop a pedagogy that is interconnected and dynamic, and thus is in harmony with the cosmos. In contrast, much of traditional education tends to be static and fragmented, ultimately promoting alienation and suffering in others. Holistic education focuses on the relationship between the whole and the part, and suggests that teaching and learning approaches need to be rooted in a larger vision. Within this holistic perspective, the student is positioned as an active, participatory. The holistic vision includes a sense of the whole person and environment. Holistic education frequently claims that it wants to educate the whole child, all parts of the child, educate the student as a whole and not an assemblage of parts. See the child as part of a whole society, humanity, the environment, some spiritual whole, from which it is not meaningful to extract the student. Holistic education challenges the present approach to education and its obsessive focus on standards and testing. Holistic educators see this approach as reflecting a materialist and consumerist culture that has reduced schooling to the training of individuals to compete and consume in the global marketplace. The present thrust can be seen as abandoning any attempt to educate the whole human being. It reduces schooling to training for the workplace that can be easily assessed through standardized tests. Holistic educators are convinced that the further evolution of civilization and human consciousness requires a renewed measure of respect and reverence for the inner life of the growing person. Holistic education provides students with a sense of meaning and order to things. By introducing students to a holistic view of the planet, life on Earth, holistic strategies enable students to perceive and understand the various contexts which shape and give meaning to life. Holistic education is a journey for both the educator and the student. For both, the nature of holistic education can change as they each progress through the program and draw different experiences from it. The process of holistic education must therefore be flexible and dynamic to accommodate these personal differences and influences. Differences in the rate of personal progression. The holistic ideal can be traced back to indigenous cultures. In general, the Aboriginal or indigenous person sees the earth and the universe as infused with meaning, and holistic educators try to recover this sense of meaning and purpose in education. The concept of holism comes from the Greek concept of holon, paradigm that sees the universe as made up of integrated wholes that cannot be reduced in parts. The Greeks argued for a holistic approach in learning. Socrates can be seen as a holistic educator because he encouraged each person to examine his or her own life. Know thyself. The holistic paradigm emerged as a vibrant and coherent intellectual movement